Please welcome author, science TV correspondent, and radio host, Michio Kaku.
Well, after such a great introduction, I can't wait to hear the speaker myself. You know, I have the privilege of being able to interview on television some of the world's great scientists. And every time I interview these scientists, I ask them the key question, the most important question of all. The question I ask them, this great question, is there intelligent life on the earth? Well, I was watching the Kardashians on TV last night. And sometimes you really wonder. But one thing for me is very certain, and that is that in this room, we have some of the great minds, the most energetic, the most inquisitive minds. You are the makers of the future. So applaud yourself for being some of the most intelligent people around. In today's talk, I'm going to talk about the exploration of outer space. I'm a physicist. We're going to go centuries, millennia into the future. And who knows, maybe we'll encounter intelligent beings as we venture into the galaxy. But you know, I get a lot of emails. And some of the emails say, "Professor, you're wrong. You are really wrong. The aliens are not there. The aliens are here." And then I say to them, "How do you know that the aliens walk among us?" And they say, "That's because they've been kidnapped. They've been kidnapped by flying saucers." Well, I say this: the next time you are kidnapped by a flying saucer, for God's sake, steal something. An alien chip, an alien paperclip, anything, because there's no law against stealing from an extraterrestrial civilization. No law whatsoever. And we need proof that there is something out there in the universe. Well, today, we're going to talk about the future. And I've had the privilege of writing 5 New York Times bestsellers about the future of robotics, the future of the mind, when we communicate telepathically through the internet. My latest book is called The God Equation, about what I do for a living. I work on something called string theory, which we think, but cannot yet prove, is the theory that eluded Einstein for the last 30 years of his life. A theory of everything that says that all the subatomic particles we see in nature are nothing but vibrations on a tiny vibrating string. So what is physics? Physics is the harmonies you can make on these tiny vibrating strings. What is chemistry? Chemistry are the melodies you can play when these strings interact with each other. What is the universe? The universe is a symphony of strings. And then what is the mind of God that Einstein labored for so many decades of his life? The mind of God would be cosmic music resonating through hyperspace. That would be a candidate for the mind of God. But today we're going to ask a different question, and that is life on the earth. Did you know that of all the life forms that have existed on the earth, 99.9% of all living creatures eventually go extinct? Let me repeat that again. 99.9% of all living creatures eventually become extinct. And if you don't believe me, simply dig underneath your feet. When you dig underneath your feet, you will encounter all the fossils, all the skeletons and bones of all the creatures that existed before us. And what about the dinosaurs? Well, how come we have no dinosaurs today? And that's because The dinosaurs did not have a space program. Well, today we do have a space program, but look at the odds. One day we will be part of that 99.9% of living forms that never make it. The probability of a city buster, that is the probability of an object that can take out Moscow, Washington, San Francisco, they happen about once every 100 years. And right on schedule, Russia had two city busters in 200 years, right on schedule, in Chelyabinsk and in Tunguska in Russia. What about a nation buster that can take out England, take out Germany? They happen once every few thousand years. And then what about a planet buster? A planet buster takes place once every 50 million years. And then the question is, are we up for another planet buster? 65 million years ago, the dinosaurs were wiped out by an object maybe 6 miles across that slammed into the Yucatan of Mexico, creating a tidal wave perhaps a mile across. Think of the devastation created by just one rock. Think of this dinosaur. When I see a picture like this, I say to myself, what was he thinking? What was he thinking when he saw this rock in the sky? He probably said to himself, oh, shit. I mean, the end of the reign of dinosaurs. And the question is, are we going to go the same way? Well, we do have a space program. How come there are no dinosaurs in this room today? They didn't have what we have. But our space program came to a screeching halt. What happened? Well, there was the Vietnam War, there was the Cold War. But the real reason why the space program came to a dead halt is because of a 4-letter dirty word. Cost, C-O-S-T. In the year 1966, the space program consumed about 5% of the entire U.S. federal budget. That was unsustainable. How much does outer space exploration cost? Take a pound of anything. What does it cost to put this pound of anything into orbit around the planet Earth? The answer, $10,000. That is roughly your weight in gold. The next time you see an astronaut in outer space, think of that astronaut made out of solid gold, and you begin to realize the cost to put humans into outer space. But now we're entering a new era of space exploration. Why? Among other reasons, because rockets are now reusable. For example, let's say you're the owner of a sports car factory, and you make a sports car. A beautiful sports car rolls off the factory line. And the sports car goes once around the block and then crashes. How much do sports cars cost if they only go a few blocks and become a pile of junk? That's the space program. We call this gigantic booster rocket, this pinnacle of industrial might, and we shoot it into outer space once. And then what do we do with it? We put it in the oceans. Rockets are now reusable, which means that a new timetable is emerging. We're going to go back into outer space with reusable rockets, propelled not just with public funds, but public and private funds, and billionaires, for whatever reason, for ego, whatever, billionaires are opening up their checkbooks, saying that, yes, I want to be part of it. I want to be part of this new exploration of space. So a new timetable is emerging. In the next few years, we're going to run the first test of a moon rocket, unmanned moon rocket, just within the next 2 years or so. After that, a woman, a person of color, will land on the moon. After that, we're going to build a space station around the moon. And after that, it's on to Mars. And so we're talking about a new era in space travel, an era that's not going to bankrupt the United States. It's going to be self-sufficient. And who knows? Costs are dropping like a rock. And some people are saying that maybe one day we'll have a space hotel in outer space. You see, space travel is no different from the railroads, no different from ordinary transportation, which goes in 3 stages. In the first stage, you have the railroads that ship military supplies, lumber, hardware. That's stage 1. Stage 1 is when a new transportation system ships gigantic heavy goods for heavy industry and the government and the military. Then you eventually enter stage 2. In stage 2, rich people began to say, hey, I can take advantage of this. We can create luxury liners. And then in stage 3, mom and dad now become part of this new revolution. So a space hotel sounds outlandish today, but just realize costs keep plunging, opening up new vistas for possible exploration. And so 3 stages: cars, trains, airplanes, and now rockets. Rockets are now entering stage 2, where people say that all these billionaires going into outer space, what a waste. What a waste, an ego trip, having billionaires go into outer space. All I'm saying is that's the natural sequence. The natural sequence by transportation is developed. And one day, I suspect that perhaps your grandchildren will have the option of honeymooning on the moon. It takes only 3 to 4 days to go to the moon from the Earth. To go to Mars would take maybe 7 to 9 months. But to go to the moon is a hop, skip, and a jump. And then, perhaps after that, on to Mars. Now, Mars is a whole different ball of wax. We're not talking about a 3 or 4 day jump to the moon. We're talking about a journey that takes about 2 years. 7 to 9 months to reach Mars, a few more months to wait for the stars to realign, and then another 7 to 9 months to come back. But there are plans to one day terraform Mars. And the going to Mars is getting cheaper and cheaper. You know the movie The Martian with Matt Damon? That movie cost $100 million. But the Indians sent a probe to Mars for $70 million. In other words, sending Hollywood actors to a movie set impersonating Mars is more expensive than actually going to Mars. So the price has dropped for those reasons. Rockets being reusable, public and private partnership, billionaires helping to pave the way for new vistas. Now, of course, the exploration of Mars is not going to happen overnight. It'll be part of a much larger program. And how do we sustain something on that scale? On that scale, we're going to have to rely on the fact that eventually technology will save the day. Sustainability is the name of the game. We don't want a settlement on Mars to be a drain on human society. We want the settlement on Mars to pay for itself. One possibility is to melt the polar ice caps. When you melt the polar ice caps, just remember that Mars, once upon a time, was a lush planet. It had riverbeds. It had oceans, we think. An ocean about the size of the United States of America. Once upon a time, Mars was a lush planet. And how do we think we can terraform Mars? Perhaps by sending up satellites. Satellites that could beam the energy back down on the polar ice caps. Now, you may say to yourself, well, all this is nice, but who's going to foot the bill? One possibility is to mine the asteroid belt. Now, Thomas Jefferson was once our president, and Thomas Jefferson made one of the biggest gambles in all of American history, the Louisiana Purchase. Thomas Jefferson doubled the size of the United States. And then in Thomas Jefferson's memoirs, he said that, well, what have I done? I've doubled the size of the United States, and it'll take 1,000 years, he said. 1,000 years to colonize this vast area, unexplored area called the Louisiana Purchase. Well, what happened soon after Thomas Jefferson wrote those words? What happened? You all read this in your history books. They discovered gold. Gold in California. The gold rush was on. And that reduced this 1,000-year journey to colonize the West into just 100 years. Some people think that what we need is a new Louisiana Purchase, perhaps to mine the asteroid belt. And if we do that, perhaps we'll go even beyond to the extrasolar planets, 5,000 of which have now been cataloged carefully. And what lies beyond that? Well, if you want to see a black hole tonight, go outside, look in the direction of Sagittarius. By rights, in the direction of Sagittarius, there should be a fireball, a gigantic fireball that lights up the night sky every night, outshining the moon. But what do you see when you look in the direction of Sagittarius? Nothing. Nothing. Why? Dust clouds. If you could somehow remove the dust clouds, there's a black hole in the center of the Milky Way galaxy, which unfortunately is hidden by dust clouds. What is inside a black hole? Well, nobody knows. If one of you in the audience ever figures out what's inside a black hole, tell me first. And we'll split the Nobel Prize money together. Now, Albert Einstein had an idea. Why not take a black hole and stick two of them together back to back? This is 1935, and Albert Einstein discovers the wormhole, a gateway, perhaps, to go to the stars. And where have you seen this wormhole before? You've all seen it as a child. The first mention of a wormhole in English literature was a children's book called Through the Looking Glass, written by a professor of mathematics at Cambridge University. His name was Charles Dodgson. Being a professor of mathematics at Oxford, he could not write it under his real name, so he wrote it under a fake name, Lewis Carroll. Lewis Carroll was a mathematician, and he realized if you stick two spaces together, you can create a shortcut through space and time. Now, of course, the energy necessary to harness this power is far beyond anything that we can muster. But we've looked at civilizations in outer space. Perhaps a type 1 civilization beyond the Earth. Perhaps something like what you see in Buck Rogers or Flash Gordon. A type 2 civilization harnesses the power of a star, an entire star. A civilization like Star Trek. Star Trek would be a typical type 2 civilization. And then there's a galactic possibility, a galactic civilization which you see in Star Wars. And so we physicists have said, in outer space, is it possible that there could be type 1, type 2, and type 3 civilizations that coexist with the planet Earth? Well, find out by reading my book. But now let me close on the following note. When I was a kid, my role model was Albert Einstein. And let me tell you my favorite Einstein story. When Einstein was an old man, he was tired of giving the same talk over and over again. So one day his chauffeur came up to him, and the chauffeur said, "Professor, I'm really a part-time actor. I've heard your speech so many times I've memorized it. So why don't we switch places? I will put on a mustache, I will put on a wig, I will be the great Einstein, and you can put on my jacket and be my chauffeur." Well, Einstein loved the joke. So they switched places. This went along famously until one day, a mathematician in the back asked a very difficult question. And Einstein thought, oh, the game is up. But then the chauffeur said, "That question is so elementary that even my chauffeur here can answer it for you." Thank you very much. Thank you. You've been a great audience. Thank you very much. And now I'd like to introduce Adam Savage to the stage.
That was really wonderful, Dr. Kaku. I have a couple of follow-up questions. I'm curious if they do open up a hotel in space in a few years. Are you going to go? Are you going to get a room?
No, I'm chicken.
Yeah?
I let the other people get all the accolades and all the glories. I'd rather stay here where the Earth doesn't move.
That's sensible. Now, what do you say to people who decry spending money to explore space when we have significant problems to address right here on Earth?
Well, where does wealth come from anyway? Wealth comes from science, from the Industrial Revolution to the Electric Revolution to the Computer Revolution, and now the Artificial Intelligence Revolution. And space travel is part of wealth generation. Look at the internet. Look at telecommunications. Look at weather satellites, GPS, Wall Street. All of that is done in outer space now. And so outer space generates money, which in turn helps to eliminate income inequality on the planet Earth.
All right, fair enough. I totally agree. But I'm also really curious, reading your books, how you stay so optimistic about humanity and our chances.
Well, let me quote from the immortal words of General Dwight D. Eisenhower, who once said that pessimists never win wars. Only optimists win wars. Now, when you take a look at the long-term future of humanity, I think it's going to be touch and go. It's going to be a race against time. But I put my bet on those people who realize that, hey, we can use science to conserve power, create fusion energy, create better solar panels. I bet on scientists who can then use technology to rein in global warming.
Well, that is inspiring. Dr. Kaku, thank you so much. Another hand for Dr. Michio Kaku.